Hello and welcome to this wonderful course of computer network. Today we are going to discuss one of the application layer, that is web, and web application works with the help of HTTP protocol, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now, I hope web application doesn't need any introduction from my side because it's a very popular application which is used for browsing the web pages from the web servers. So let's first understand that what are these web pages made up of. Web pages consist of objects, and object can be HTML file, JPG, images, Java applets, audio files. You must have seen a lot of things in a web page, and in those you must have seen a lot of images. You must have seen a lot of hyperlinks. You must have seen a lot of um, like HTML content. So the basic thing which you'll find in your web page is a HTML file and some images, Java applets, audios. These all things you can find in a web page, and the main thing that web page has is the base HTML file, as I told you few seconds back. And that particular base HTML file includes several referenced objects. What I mean to say is a web page consists of a lot of other objects which are not included primarily in that particular initial web page. Initially, a base HTML file comes at the client side, and then you will find reference objects in that HTML file, and all the objects are addressable. Like the initial base HTML file is addressable, and the address which you know about that particular web page, but the other content, other objects which are residing in that particular web page are referenced by other objects. And as you can see in this particular slide, that the initial part of the web page is of the host name, and then the uh, path name where that particular document is residing inside the server. So HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol, is the heart of a web application, and this particular application works in client server architecture. As you can see at the right side of your slide, that there is a server, and you can see these are two client side or client side end systems. And you can see this in client server architecture, as we all know that the communication is always initiated by the client side, because servers are well known always. So client is the only end which can initiate the communication. And you can see there's a HTTP request from the client side to this particular server, and there's a HTTP response from the server side. So in the first response of HTTP server, this particular client will get a base HTML file, as you can see over here, base HTML file along with the referenced objects of other objects present in that particular response, or present in that particular web page. Now you can see that HTTP is a protocol which uses TCP protocol for sending its HTTP request and receiving the HTTP response from the server side. So it uses TCP. Client initiates TCP connection and creates a socket to the server at port number 80. You need to remember that HTTP is a protocol which uses port number 80. So there will be a connection uh, from client side to the server side at port number 80. Okay, then server accepts that TCP connection from client, and then finally sends HTTP response over that particular connection, and once that transfer of response is done from the server side, that connection get closed from the server side. And one more important thing about HTTP protocol is this particular protocol is a stateless protocol. That means this particular protocol doesn't maintain any kind of information or anything uh, about that particular session which is created by the client for browsing the web pages from the web servers. As it is clearly mentioned over here that there are some protocols which can maintain the states of their clients. Well, HTTP is a stateless protocol which doesn't maintain the state of its clients. So as I told you earlier as well that object a particular web page has n number of objects, and if those objects are received over a single TCP connection, in that case that connection is called persistent HTTP connection. Here it is also mentioned that multiple objects can be sent over a single TCP connection between client and server, and in case if all those objects need a separate TCP connection to get transferred from server to the client side, then in that case that HTTP connection is called non-persistent HTTP connection. Initially at the launch of this particular HTTP protocol, we used to browse the web pages with the help of non-persistent HTTP connections, but these days we always use persistent HTTP connection the um, for saving the time for browsing the web pages from the server. So as you can see that it's mentioned in non-persistent case that at most one object sent over TCP connection then closed. Downloading multiple objects require multiple connections. So there are two types of HTTP connections: persistent and non-persistent. So as you can see on your slide that if HTTP client wants to browse a web page and that web page contains 10 JPG image or 10 reference objects, then this particular HTTP client initially initiates TCP connection to HTTP server, and HTTP server at host waiting for TCP connection at port number 80. As I told you earlier that it creates a connection on port number 80 because it's HTTP protocol which uses port number 80 at the server side, and then it replies back to the client. HTTP client then sends a HTTP request message. This is one of the important thing, as I have already mentioned in our last video lectures that protocol is nothing but it's a set of rules which governs the data communication. And if I also provided a definition in terms of data communication or computer networks, that protocol is the one which decides the format of a particular message. So here if HTTP protocol is used, and HTTP protocol has a HTTP request format and has a HTTP response format. So in the same way, once we are done with the TCP connection which is created with the help of three-way handshaking between client and server, once we are done with that part, then this HTTP client send a HTTP request message to the server, and HTTP server will send a response message uh, to its client, as you can see, and that response message is HTTP receives response message containing HTML file, displays HTML, and parsing HTML file finds 10 referenced JPG objects. As I told you earlier as well that that particular basic uh, HTML response which you get from the server side, in that particular file you will get base HTML file in which you have HTML content along with the other referenced objects URLs. Then your client side has to, because once server is done with the first HTTP response in non-persistent HTTP connection, HTTP server closes the TCP connection after sending the base HTML file or the first HTTP response. Once this particular server done with its task, then this client will find 10 other URLs or referenced JPG objects in its base HTML file, and this client has to create 10 TCP connections for browsing those 10 images from the server side. So it's quite simple that whatever numbers of objects you have in your base HTML file, in non-persistent HTTP case, you have to create those number of TCP connections with the server. So here in this particular slide, you have a calculation of round trip time that as I just told you about the three-way handshaking of TCP connection. First of all, this particular client side will create a TCP connection with the server, and you can see it's a three-way handshaking. And once you are done with this three-way handshaking part, once you are done with the TCP connection with the server, then you will create a HTTP request from this client side, and you send that request over this TCP connection to the to this particular server, and you will get a HTTP response, which you can see over here. So it takes around 2 round trip times to get the first HTTP response from the server side in case of your non-persistent connection, and then you have to again repeat this particular process for uh, the other objects present in your web page. So it's going to be very time consuming process to use non-HTTP persistent connection for browsing a particular web page from the web server. So in that case, there's one more HTTP uh, connection that is called persistent HTTP connection. And as I told you earlier as well, that server leaves connection open after sending first HTTP response. Subsequent HTTP messages between same client and server sent over that open HTTP connection. Client sends request as soon as it encounters a reference object, as little as one RTT for all the reference objects. So it's quite simple. I hope you understand the difference between non-persistent and persistent HTTP connections. Now you can see that this is the HTTP request message format, in which this particular first line is called request line, and in this first line you have first field, that is the method which you are going to use in HTTP request, and the second tuple which you can see in the request line is the URL of that particular web page which is residing inside the server, and this is basically it's the address of that particular web page in that particular server where you are looking your web page. And this 1.1 is the version of HTTP protocol, and this request line followed by some header lines which you can see over here, and these headers are used for the communication purpose. These headers are used for uh, providing information from client side to the server side to the server, and in HTTP response you will find these headers again for providing information from server side to the client side. That's how client server communicates with each other with the help of these headers. And then finally you have line feed. In some of the HTTP requests you may find the body part because it's a simple HTTP request in which you don't have to upload anything to the server. So that's why you do not have body over here. And most of the time in HTTP request you find only request line followed by some header lines. And you can see this is the exact format of your message. As I told you that the first field is method, second is URL, and third is the version of HTTP protocol, then followed by some headers which are used for communication between client and server, then carriage return or a blank line, and followed by a body which you may not find in the HTTP request. And these are the methods which can be used over here. Like as it is using get method, this particular method is used for getting or browsing the web pages from the uh, server. In the same way, we have a lot of methods through which you can browse the web pages. You can browse only the header part. If you do not want to browse the complete web page, if you want the information only about the web page. In the same way, we have a lot of other methods which can be used in the HTTP request. And these are the two versions of HTTP protocol, 1.0 and 1.1. Both are compatible with each other. And this is the exact HTTP response which you can see on your screen. And this particular response I can show you on the black window or on the command prompt with the help of Telnet and TCP connection, and that will do in the practical work of our this particular computer network subject. So first of all, let's understand what we have in this HTTP response. First of all, we have a status line, and this status line is got the initial part of this status line or response line is got the protocol version, which you can see it's using HTTP 1.1. Second is the status code, which is 200, and the third part is the status phrase, then followed by some headers as you can see over here, and then the body part, which is separated by a blank line over here. And you can find you can always find data or body part in the HTTP response. And these are some status codes which you can see over here, that 200 means okay, 301 means moved permanently, 400 means bad request. Most of the time you must have seen in the web browser that you are getting 400 and 404 message. So that 404 means requested a document not found on that particular server. And most of the time you see this 400, that means it's a bad request from client side. And 505 is used for HTTP version not supported. So these are some of the status codes which you can find in your HTTP response. And this is the real-time example of HTTP request and HTTP response, which you can see. Telnet to your favorite web server with the help of these commands. First of all, you have to create a TCP connection in between client and server, and then you have to send a HTTP request over that particular connection, and you will get a this is the format of HTTP request. This is the command which is used for creating the TCP connection, which you can see on your screen. And in the same way, you will get a HTTP response from the server side. So that is enough for the HTTP protocol or web application which uses HTTP protocol. And this particular protocol is mostly used protocol in computer network, which is used for browsing the web pages from the web servers. One thing which you need to remember about HTTP protocol web application is web application is completely based on the client server architecture. And in the client server architecture, the requesting and response format are designed by HTTP protocol. And that those HTTP request and response formats are transferred from client side to server side, and from server side to the client side on a TCP connection which is created with the help of three-way handshaking, and HTTP uses port number 80. So these are the important points about HTTP protocol. Thank you. We'll see you in the next lecture.